Ashkenazi, lachonji mekibbe. Oh Sephardi, word l'chaim. Ashkenazi, head in the party. Oh Sephardi, I gotta go to Ashkenazi, gotta chademe. Oh Sephardi, dude, again, that's only the Syrian. Yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, yaloile, yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, oh yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, yaloile, yala yala yalili. Tanz, 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 Habibi, yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, yaloile, yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, oh yala yala yalili, yala yala yalili, yaloile, yala yala yalili. Tanz, 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 Habibi.
We're in the mix with DJ Shia.
יש אנשים שלא מרגישים שהלהבה אשר בוערת מבפנים היא בתוך הנשמה.
Hello, and welcome. Make sure I'm off. Okay, here we go. So, welcome to those who are with us live and those who will be listening to this later on. In a little bit over a week from now is the holiday of Shavuos. And the holiday of Shavuos is the holiday of the giving of the Torah, and the holiday that also marks the day of the passing of the holy Baal Shemtov. And the holy Baal Shemtov is the classes whose teachings we're going to delve into today. And the holy Baal Shemtov came to the world at a very difficult time, 50 years after the massacre, the Chmielewski massacre, and a period of time of Jewish history that was the most difficult period in terms of persecution and anti-Semitism. The Jews had just finished a horrible event in which half of the Jewish people worldwide believed in a false Messiah. And this was the background in which the Baal Shemtov, the holy Baal Shemtov, who was a great mystic, came into the circle, or came into the scene, I should say. Excuse me. Having said that, the Baal Shemtov is an important character and figure for every single human being alive today. And that is because the teachings of the Baal Shemtov are filled with narratives and words and ideas that give us a completely transformative insight into the events and occurrences that are unfolding before us at all times. And these teachings are ideas that were not available to the masses until the time of the Baal Shemtov. And therefore, the Baal Shemtov can be seen as a gift from heaven to give us that which we need during these difficult times where there's so much confusion in the world. And therefore, it's the exact medication that we need in order to be able to get through all of the dirt and the dust that is part of the journey of today, and really be in touch constantly with the soul of all things, which is really what the Baal Shemtov is all about. Now, before I go into the actual teaching that I'm going to share with you today, I want to tell you that I'm going to be sharing, God willing, a lot of new stories that are not yet available in audio about the Baal Shemtov and about his journey, which will be available at our website, God willing, where you'll be able to listen to different series to really get a greater clarity as to who the Baal Shemtov was and why it's amazingly important, really, in our times. So now that I got through that, let me share this teaching of the Baal Shemtov. It's important to understand that the way that we operate as human beings is something that we have the ability to really have a deeper insight into the map of who it is as we are as human beings. And as an example, it's not something that necessarily you'll find in a common conversation between people. But if you broke down the human soul, so to speak, into different categories, the following would really encapsulate the entirety of our existence. And that is the force of life and the will that is the driving force, which is higher than anything, including intelligence. Meaning there's a will within us that transcends the realm of intelligence. And then we have intelligence. And then we have emotional. And then we have behavior. And the three of those together, the four, the will, the intelligence, the emotions, and the behavior really make up the entirety of the existence of a human being. Having said that, the more that we gain insight into the details of these categories and how they operate, the more we could be in touch with the great possibilities that God has embedded within our existence, only to remain available to us if we so choose to access them, so we could really be empowered with the highest limitless possibilities of our soul. So there is a way in which we operate naturally, and that's what we often call or describe as the primal soul. And then there is the part of our existence that's higher than the physical container, the vehicle, the body, in which it lives or it is for the period of time of our lifetime. So let's talk about the primal self for a moment. The primal self is very interesting to observe because it's something that's easy to observe. Here's a fact about the primal self. When a person is in true state of fear, which is something that exists within us, it's part of our emotions. It's the extreme left of our emotions when you learn about it in the Kabbalistic terminologies. When a person is in a state of fear, like, for example, we'll bring up as an example, but the example is like, for example, when a person is being attacked by a snake, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for a person at the exact same time to be in a state of love. And that's because the way that we operate as human beings, primal beings, when one of the characteristics of ours are charged up and in its full glory, that which is the opposite of it, which is a state of love, could not be present. So that's why it's interesting. The Talmud says that when a person is mourning someone who had passed on, there are times that you're not supposed to try to bring comfort to them. When the person who passed away is still not yet buried, so it's not the right time to bring comfort to them because they're not in that state of receiving that kind of information. It's unnatural to be able to receive comfort in that kind of state of mind. So instead, the way the primal self works is that when we're in one extremity, we cannot be in the other at the same time. And this is what's so fascinating about the teaching we're about to read. The Baal Shemtov talks about the teaching that comes actually from the tractate of Brachas in the Mishnah that says that a person should always enter into the house of prayer a measurement of 2 doorways, and then only afterward to pray. In other words, a person shouldn't just go right next to the door, but a person should go in. The literal meaning of it is a person should go into the synagogue, all the way into the synagogue, and that's how a person should pray. But it's interesting because the Zohar, which is the Kabbalah, gives us the more esoteric meaning of this. And the word psachim, like we said before, is doors, could also be referring to something that's esoteric in its reference to doors, and that is the doors to heaven. In other words, there are 2 doorways into heaven. One of them is the doorway of awe. And awe is when a person is in such a state of awe of Hashem that they connect to Hashem in that way, like we see by Isaac, our forefather. And then there is the entrance of love, where a person is so deeply filled with gratitude to Hashem, so deeply yearning to be at one with the will of Hashem, with the absence of the inflated ego, etc. So each one of these characteristics the Zohar refers to as a doorway. And therefore, in the meaning now, it would mean that when a person enters in to go pray to God, a person has to first make sure that they have ignited both their love of Hashem and their awe of Hashem. The simple meaning or translation or application of awe of Hashem is the fact that we choose not to do certain things because we are in awe of Hashem and we know that Hashem does not want us to do those things. The simple meaning of being in a state of love of Hashem is when, because of our love to Hashem, we adhere to that which Hashem wants of us, instructed to us through His holy Torah. So what, therefore, the Zohar is telling us is that in order to pray, one has to make sure that it's not just words, saying words in the prayer book, but rather it should be an experience of awe and love of Hashem. So here's what the holy Baal Shemtov said about this in the name of the Ramban, the Nachmanides. The fact is, as we stated earlier, it's actually not possible naturally to have these two opposing characteristics at once. How could it be requested that one should enter into the state of prayer through both being in a state of love and being in a state of awe? It's like it's two opposites. How is it possible? It's two opposites. So the Baal Shemtov says that's the novelty when it comes to serving Hashem, that if you think about it, it is actually the only way in which the two characteristics in their extremities, that the two characteristics could work together. And it's interesting because he explains it in the commentary here based on a different teaching from the Magid, from the student of the Baal Shemtov. And he says the following, okay? This is really interesting. He says, the fact is that everything that God created in the world is made up, as we know, the Kabbalah talks about it a lot. It's made up of the four elements of fire, air, water, and earth. Now, the nature of fire and water is that they are opposites of each other. So if you think about it, love is water, awe is fire. How could they be in one state? But here's the interesting thing. The truth is, there is that force which is higher and brings them both about, that has the ability to bring them together. And that is, of course, when a person is in a state of connectivity to Hashem and their service to Hashem, even though the nature of love and awe are opposite of each other. Like we said earlier about the snake, when a person's afraid of a snake, it's not possible for them to be in a state of love at the moment. And the same is also true when a person is actually loving something. It's not possible to be in a state of awe at the same time. And I want to just put that in other words, by the way, because I've heard it said differently. And you know, in a relationship, every relationship requires these two aspects too, these two characteristics, these two movements. There has to be that which is the love of it, which is the connectivity and the expression, and that which brings the two together. And then there has to be the awe, which is the respect of each other's boundaries. But the reality is that when one is in an expression and exertion of love, it also requires to have a discipline. And the same could be said over here also. If and when, I should say, a person is generating their expression to their partner from a space that's higher than themselves, but more about the two of them together, then those boundaries are able to come out even in an expression of love. But otherwise, if it's only an expression of the primal self that's being expressed, then that too could become a problem for the recipient. Either way, getting back to our conversation, we're talking about connecting to Hashem. And because both the characteristic of love and the characteristic of awe, because they both represent a force, or I should say are created and are brought about by that which is greater than the two of them, then and therefore it's possible for one to have the state of both states at the same time. And in that regard, we find a story in the Talmud with Rabbi Akiva, who it talks about how together with three of his colleagues, they entered into the Pardes. By the way, sounds very close to paradise. That's because it's actually the acronym for four Hebrew words: Pshat, which means the simple meaning; Remez, which means that which is alluded to; Drush, which is that which is the homiletic; and Sod, which is the esoteric. So they entered into the deepest teachings of it all. And in the deepest teachings, one could come to a state of realization that shakes up one's entire core. And that's a conversation for a different time. But part of which could happen as a result of that is the infinite desire of the soul to want to cleave to the Creator in a way where a person could actually expire. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. One of the colleagues of Rabbi Akiva expired. And that's because he had the love activated without the awe. Because the awe would be the reminder that God has put us here for a purpose, and that's not to expire, but to continue and to do the work that we're each here to do, the uniqueness that we each have. But he didn't implement the awe, and therefore he expired. And there were two other stories with the other two that also went wrong. But Rabbi Akiva, it says, he went in peace, and he came out in peace. And the idea is that because of his innate connection to the source of the experience that he was having, and the deep knowing that his existence required him to be on earth as long as God wanted him here, to bring about the light of Hashem in this world and not to expire, and being so solidly anchored into both of these aspects at once, both the love and the awe, that's how he was able to come out and survive the situation. So how does this apply to us, right? How does it apply to us? And it applies to us to let us know that really, if we want to be authentic about our relationship with Hashem, then the two movements that are constantly required in our growth is something that expresses our love to Hashem, and that would be a resolution and resolve to add, even if it's in a small way, but to add to the list of mitzvot that we're doing already, or the way in which we're doing the mitzvahs, the connection, because after all, that would be the actual physical manifestation that expresses the love that we're generating in our relationship with Hashem. And the same would also be true with the awe part of us. The awe part of us is knowing that there are certain things each of us know in our own life that we could improve on, and we could let go of certain things that we know that may not be consistent with the purpose of our existence and the mission of why we are here. And when we are truly in a state of awe, then that should generate a resolution for us to take on something new that we make a decision to no longer do. It could be shellfish, could be lobster. But the point is that when we take on the expression of awe, not just in the feelings and the ideas that are generated, sometimes even to the sense where there's a warm feeling in our soul of the connection that we're having to God, but when we implement it into the behavior part of who we are, then that opens up the connection that we seek during prayer. And that is what the Baal Shemtov is telling us, that the Zohar is telling us regarding the Mishnah, that in order to enter into the sanctuary of prayer, we first have to make sure we enter the gates of love and awe. All right, I hope that you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, oh, Lisa, wow, Mazel Tov, it's good to see you.